And it's going to be a video showing the replacement of a lower control arm on a 92 Mustang 5.0. So we'll be replacing this down here with a new section, or a new one. It's going to consist of taking off the strut, caliper, undoing a couple of these, it's a steering linkage, outer tie rod. I'm also going to replace this sway bar end link as it connects to the lower control arm. And so yeah, we're gonna have to drop the spring out in order to do this. We already did the passenger side and couldn't find a good YouTube video, so decided we'll make a quick one, hopefully to help somebody else if they're in the same situation. So again, for a 92 Fox body Mustang, and we do have the benefit of working on a lift, but hopefully this is still helpful if you're working on the ground. All right, first thing we're gonna do is remove the brake caliper using a 17mm socket on these two bolts right there. Okay, with the caliper out of the way, next we'll do the outer tie rod end and the sway bar end link and get those disconnected before we move on to the strut. Our outer tie rod end is going to be really easy because we just replaced the steering rack, but yours will probably be harder to disconnect. Okay, I've got these two out of the way, so next I'll break loose the nuts on the strut. I've got aftermarket Bilstein struts, but it should be similar. Just loosen these two bolts on your strut on this end. All right, so we got the two nuts off on the strut, and we got it broken loose at the top right here. So next what we're gonna do is support the bottom of the control arm with the jack and take off the strut so we can drop the control arm out of the way, or the spindle out of the way, so we can get to the bolts on the control arm back there. So we'll do that next. All right, so what we did is we dropped the car down the lift, got the jack underneath the control arm, and just barely jacked up the control arm so that we can take stress. We're barely compressing the spring so we can take stress off of these bolts here. Got the bottom bolt out, and now I'm going to work on getting this bolt out and unscrewing this so we can get the strut off, but making sure that we're supporting everything, specifically the spring, the control arm with the jack. Once we get the strut out of the way, then we'll lower the jack, and the control arm will drop and the spring will just fall out. We also need to make sure that we clear this sway bar end link as well. If you happen to have these Bilstein shocks on your Fox body, you can't get that top strut mount bolt out. It's because these bolts have a little cam in them. You can see like that. So you have to line it up just right for this to go in and out. So it has to align the hole in the strut and the hole in the spindle arm to get out. So what I ended up having to do, I fought with it for about probably 30 minutes or an hour. Just have to keep kind of rotating it till it centers the bolt inside of the spindle and the strut hole, and then hit it out with the hammer. So finally got it by looking at it this way and spinning the bolt until it looked like the bolt was centered inside of this hole in here, and then hit it with the hammer and it came out. So once you get those bolts out the way, you can get the strut off to the side, and then your spindle will be loose here. Just be careful. See, mine's being held up by the dust shield against the jack. If that wasn't there, the spindle would just kind of fall out towards you. Put a lot of stress on this ball joint here, but I'm replacing this ball joint, so I don't really care too much. But anyways, got the strut out the way, so now I should be able to lower the control arm and get the spring out of the way, and then I can get to those two bolts back there to get the control arm off. And then again, making sure that I clear this sway bar end link whenever I'm taking it all apart. guess that spring's loose. Still have a little tension on it, but it's out now. Now we can access our control arm bolts right there. All right, so that nut on the inside, actually both of the nuts, this one and that one, both 24mm socket, and I was actually able to get my little breaker bar on here and actually get it to turn. So I'll try to get these off by hand if I can. It's kind of hard to get the impact on them, but you can see it's coming off by hand. So these have never been off before, so hopefully yours come off by hand as well. This other one I was also able to break loose by hand pretty easily, so once I get it broken loose enough, I'll put a ratchet on them, and there we go. That wasn't bad at all, actually. So I'll get the ratchet on it here in a little bit, and probably have to use a crescent wrench on the, yeah, see it's starting to spin on the outside there. So probably get a crescent wrench on there and a ratchet on the inside, and finish getting these off, and then the control room will be out. I'm actually going to use a 13th, 16th out here to hold this in place while I loosen these. All right, now I got both of these nuts out, and these bolts just pull out either side here. Then you've got your separated control arm. So what I'll do now is I'll take this over to the table and take off the rotor and the dust shield so that I can get the control arm separated from the spindle here, because as you can see here, control arm will not clear the dust shield or the rotor, so you gotta take this stuff off to get the control arm off because of the ball joint. All right, to get the rotor and dust shield off, first you got to get this little dust cap off the front. Should just pry off pretty easily. Screwdriver. Then you got this cotter pin and this this nut. All right, once you got your dust shield off, now you can go and remove this cotter pin and this nut to get the lower ball joint from the control arm separated from the spindle. Now you can do all of this, you know, taking off the spindle while it's still on the car. You may want to do that. I just did it this way just because I have less of a chance of mucking up the greased end of the spindle. But when I put it back on, I'll probably put everything back on and then put the spindle and dust shield and rotor back on once it's back on the car. So either way you want to do that, but this does have to come off in order to get this to clear from each other. You gotta take off the dust shield. Okay, I can't get the ball joint separated, so I'm going to use the little ball joint separator tool I have. I highly recommend this if you don't have one of these. I'll put a link below for it. Okay, so we're ready to put in our new lower control arm. I'm going to be reusing the bolts that we took out. I read online that these are like one-time use bolts, so some people get new ones, but we're going to just reuse those. I am going to clean them up a little bit with some, you know, just WD-40 and a wire brush. All right, so at this point, important thing to note is that you do not want to torque these up tight yet. You just kind of want to get them, I mean, you can get them started and get them just a little snug. You don't want to torque them and start compressing these, because to tighten them up and do the final torque, you want to make sure that the car is at ride height, basically with the weight on the suspension. Because if you see, these pivot around right there, and they got little rubber bushings and stuff, so you don't want to torque it here and then rotate it a bunch when it's torqued down tight. So make sure you wait till the car is back on the ground or everything's put back together and you've got the jack under here compressing the spring to torque these bolts. So now is the hardest part, in my opinion, is getting the spring back in without using a spring compressor. So wish us luck. Hopefully we can do this again like we did on the passenger side. Before we put the spring on, we're going to put the spindle back on.
Get over here and plug it in.
So we got the spindle on, ball joint tightened with the cotter pin in, and everything with the rotor on. So now we're going to try to put the spring in next. And so basically what we're going to try to do is put the spring up in there. I'm going to pry on it with a pry bar on the bottom there while my dad jacks it up, and we'll try to get it in. This is a technique another guy on YouTube used. I'll link his video below, and we'll see if we can do it again. So we put it in, but we realized that the bottom tail of the spring isn't sitting correctly in the pocket. So we're gonna drop it back out and try again. All right, you wanna lower it and see what? Jeez. Okay. All right, round two. There we go. Put the spring in. Trying to line the tail up correctly. I guess I'll get this first. Here we go. Okay, hold on. Still have to be jacking up on it. Still on the perch? Yeah. Remember, yeah, we don't want to jack up because now I can't get my jack out. My thing out. Come on this way.
Can you pull it this way?
No, you gotta let it down.
You want me to let it down?
Yeah. Just a little bit. Not a lot of it.
Still in there?
Yeah. There it goes. Woo! Now that we got the spring in violently, we can put the strut back in to make sure it doesn't come out. We can get the jack out of the way. All right, so now that we got the shock just kind of loosely installed, or the strut I mean, the bolts in. Next I'm gonna do the sway bar end link. And this comes in kind of pieces like that, but I'm gonna do it with the bolt head pointing down. So I'll put one of these isolators there. Go through the bottom hole in the control arm there. Drop another squishy isolator on. A washer. This metal piece, these are the Moog end links, so this is how they come. That just slides on there. Then I can do another washer, another isolator. Then finally I can run it through the sway bar end. Hopefully. Yep, there we go. One more squishy part. And then the top piece has a washer built in. So then I'll just screw that onto the top of it. And just like everything else, I'm just gonna kind of hand start this and snug it up. And once I get some weight on the suspension, either with the jack under the control arm or the car back down on the ground, I'll come back and torque this up later. All right, now we can put the outer tie rod from the steering rack back onto the knuckle here. So just unscrew my castle nut, get that where it needs to be. Oh, hopefully you can see that. And just, there we go. Get that back in there. Put my castle nut back on. I'll tighten that down and get a cotter pin in there so that that's sufficient. And I'll look up a torque value for this and put it down here so you know. So before I put the caliper back on here, I want to finish up the bolts on the strut. So I'll start up here first and tighten this nut down on the strut. And now that we got everything snugged up, we're gonna put the wheel back on, both front wheels on the car, drop it down on the ground so that we can get it to static ride height. So we can go and torque the sway bar end links and then apply the proper torque value to the lower control arm bolts here and back here. So that's what we'll do next.